Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. Today, we've got a super interesting conversation with Ryan Torresan. And Ryan, you are the CMO right now of a large dental practice business. And you kind of cut your teeth and are really passionate about research and analytics and how it affects marketing. And we're going to get into a lot of that and talk about it today. Your passion is your family and your kids, and you've got everything going in the right direction. What I'd love to do before we get started, because we're going to talk about how to market in an intention overloaded economy. But before we get into that, I'd love to just have you expand a little bit on your background and your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. So really my background is, first 8 years coming out of college on the marketing side, I was really in the research analytics side of the business for a very large advertising agency at the time, national player. And so I didn't so much learn like the value prop or traditional marketing and stuff like that. I learned more of why does research and data point you in the right direction to make decisions. So that's really, kind of what I did the first 8 years or so. And that background really allowed me to transition. And it was a little bit of a tough transition, but get into, running marketing departments and leading them and being able to say, hey, we're not just creating colors and designs and it's just not my gut feeling that this is the best campaign ever. But it's really the data that's going to help us figure this out. And then as we progress, right, like AI and all that stuff's all data driven. So that's really helpful for me. So that's really kind of the quick background. And then, so the last 14 years or so since then, really been in this, what we kind of call dental support organization. So very large dental groups, work for some with locations, other with 60 locations. And it's always been, the head of marketing, and it bleeds in the operations side as well, because marketing ops kind of goes together, or what I call MOPS, today, and just, how do we move it forward going forward?
Well, here's how I'd love to start out. This idea, this notion of an intention overloaded economy. Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking is, what that means and what we need to take away from that.
I think so. Realistically, no matter what you're marketing, people are just bombarded with ads of every variety, right? So whether you're saying, hey, I'm old school, I'm just watching a traditional television, or I'm driving in my car, radio, on billboards down the street, down to the younger generation that's spending way more time on social media, the amount of just ads that we are getting bombarded with and how to cut through that clutter and get to people, decision makers, as fast as possible. Marketers have had to pivot, I'd say, in the last 10 years and kind of figure that out a little bit. And then just the shift of like, hey, how we did it 10 years ago is different today. And, you see like how platforms have shifted. Facebook, when it first launched, was huge, destroyed MySpace. And then when you get into like the B2B side, LinkedIn is heavily underutilized in terms of how people are generating the content and, targeting people. So just today, I say if you can't grab them in the first 3 seconds, good luck, because you probably lost them.
So I'd love to get your thoughts on LinkedIn, right? This is a B2B, podcast here. And you talk about it being incredibly underutilized. I'd love to, dig into that a little bit as we get going here. Like, what do you mean by that? What are the opportunities do you think we're all missing?
Well, so it's funny, right? When you look at LinkedIn, most people traditionally have thought of it as like a recruitment platform, because that's absolutely how it started out.
Right.
But you kind of look in the last year or two, and it's almost acting like Facebook of 2013. It's this complete social network that's kind of out there now. And people, you're looking for jobs and you're posting about your jobs and you essentially got your resume up there. But people are posting other engaging content, right? Conferences that they're going to, personal items, what they think about culture and organizations, things like that. So I think on the B2B side, like there's a massive land grab that can be going on right now when you just look at LinkedIn and everything that's kind of going. And like, I don't think you have to produce like the slickest videos. I think you can do basic videos, basic content, written word. You can target people there. You can be very strategic, content posting to the right audience and achieving equally good, like connections with that audience for, biz dev relationships, etc. So you can get that stuff now to kind of point in your right direction. So instead of me having to do 200 phone calls to try to get the right person on the phone. I can target you with the right content and connect with you, and you're more likely to get in touch with me.
Absolutely. In fact, I know that there's a lot of good automation tools too, in for reaching out and making connections with those people and creating campaigns. And one of the things we found with some of our clients is that we're getting some really good interaction and impressions from our email newsletters that we're creating on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because it's, the post is like a wild, wild west. It's great. But the newsletter has I think a connotation around it that there's actually going to be some really good targeted information for you here. And if you signed up for it, it's something that you've opted in for. And so I agree. There's just a world of marketing opportunities there, if we're open to using them. But I want to now step back into, you've got some really interesting perspectives on kind of like the B2B and the B2C in dental marketing, and how that you think that relates to the world of B2B marketing and the folks that are listening in here today.
Yes. So, on the dental front, most people think of it as, hey, I get my teeth cleaned, bring new patients in. We actually have a pretty big side to the B2B business of it as well. All these dental groups do. So it's, we're targeting practices that we're looking to acquire or bring into the fold.
Yeah.
And those are multi-million-dollar transactions usually. Sometimes it's one or two practices. Sometimes it could be a group of 10, 15, 20, or 30. And you're trying to fill a footprint or bring in services maybe that your dental group doesn't offer historically.
So in the B2B role, if you could explain to us there, the owner of the dental practice, lots of times the orthodontists themselves, they're the ones that you're targeting. Is that your B2B? Just explain maybe the B2B role that you're in, the way that it works there.
Yeah. No, so great question. So the way it works is typically there's an owner of some sort, usually a doctor. Sometimes business people like ourselves are the owners of it, so that the clinicians can focus on, doing clinical work and all that stuff. But a lot of times they're doctor owners and
Yeah.
they're really successful. And like I said, they've either, I have 1, 2, 3 practices. I might have a larger group. And so you got to target them, and so one of it is, figure out who is the true decision maker there.
Right.
If it's a larger group, let's say 6, 7 offices, typically they're going to have some business folks involved.
Right.
Those business folks like myself or yourself might be the target audience that you got to get to. So that's the old, right? Are they the CEO? Are they the owner? Are they a CEO hat? Other times, these doctors are very sophisticated. They're running it clinically, and they're also the owner and overseeing the business as well. So either way, you got to kind of figure out the decision maker and then target that individual and be able to start the conversation. And while we're doing that, 30 other groups are targeting them as well.
So you've got massive competition. You've got doctors on top of business owners, and doctors are traditionally just really hard to get a hold of and target and get their attention. And so in this intention overloaded economy, right, and a really hard audience to get to, a very competitive audience to get to, right, that's the heart of ABM marketing, right? It's like trying to get a hold of those important decision makers for large deals and transactions that can take months and months and months and months on end. So in your mind, what is the way that in that kind of a B2B environment that you do get their attention? Like, how do you break through that intention overloaded economy and start a meaningful conversation with them?
Yeah. So one of the tricks I learned years ago, like to your point, right? Everybody's kind of knocking on the door. People are busy. And so one of the things that we figured out a long time ago, don't talk to me because I'm knocking on your door today, or I'm trying to target you. Let me build that relationship beforehand. So like we were kind of mentioning LinkedIn earlier. And so I kind of went down this like peek behind the curtain road. So a lot of people that own these practices or running the business, whether the doctor or the business owners, they're looking for credible people that have done this for a while to maybe give free thought leadership that they haven't heard elsewhere. In my world, right, a lot of times I'm speaking about marketing, stuff like that. but it could be operationally how to roll out a new service. It can be, here's the best way to negotiate lab deals so it's more favorable for your practice, how to build a better culture in there. So about 10 years ago, when I was first really probing this B2B space and was given the assignment for it, we took certain people in our organization, made them thought leaders, speakers out there. And yeah, we'd hit some of the trade show events, things like that. But I purposely put that content out onto LinkedIn, targeted the person by trying to connect with them. And then we would take that content, put it back on our website, push it out on social media outside of LinkedIn as well. And then I would create partnerships with some industry publications like Group Dentistry Now, that's really well known in the industry. And we would push that same thought leadership or very similar thought leadership in a written word or through their podcast as well, so that these individuals that eventually one day we might target maybe have already heard about us.
Right.
Maybe already bought an article and they say, well, this person wasn't trying to sell to me before. This person was actually trying to help my business. And I thought they were a really credible resource. Geez, now I've heard of this Ryan guy, and maybe when I do get that email or he connects with me and says, hey, Steve, I got a great opportunity for you. Maybe we should chat. I'm going to be in New York next week or something. Want to grab a meal. They're going to be more inclined to take that conversation.
Absolutely. Here's the big takeaway from this. There's a big, I think, Edelman and LinkedIn did their 6th annual Thought Leadership Impact Report. And, it makes a huge difference on getting onto that consideration list, a huge difference of how they perceive you and the value that they're receiving from you, right? And so the quandary of a lot of B2B organizations is that thought leadership can be very hard to create. Right? We're usually thought leaders of our own tech or our own services, like what we do every single day, right? And understanding the world of a doctor, a business owner that has challenges out to here, right? It might be staffing challenges. It might be scaling challenges, right? It might be, how to deal with COVID as a dental practice, right? During that time, right? What I'm hearing from you is you're not talking about you, you're talking about them. You're talking about how they can help, you can help them, or how they can help themselves grow their business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the trick that we do there, like, look, I'm not a doctor, I don't know. I'm not running a dental practice day in and day out. But so what I did is, with our group, we have a bunch of doctors that work there. So I just went right to the source and just asked them, hey, why would you join a group like this? What sucks in your day to day? What's tough? What do you really like? When you're at study clubs, you're talking to other doctors or your doctor friends. Like, what's that? I call it the dinner conversation. Like, what are you guys actually talking about? Because it does no good for me to go out there and talk about branding from a marketing standpoint if that's not the doctor's challenges.
Right.
When, they might be saying, hey, like, I'm a little nervous about this AI thing right now. Don't know much about it. It's not my bread and butter, but I know it's there. Like, what should I even do with this thing?
Right.
And, and not understand things of like, hey, there's AI, software that you can install that can take a missed call rate in your office of, let's say, 20% down to next to 0. And with the knowledge base in there, you communicate to your patients, and they can book directly what we fall into the PMS system, the practice management system. So like when you talk to the doctors, like I figure out their pain points, what are they living with? What are they having around the dinner conversation? That's the content that I put out there. And then it's the old, like, Ray, why don't you put it on LinkedIn? You'll see the comments and see what people are saying. And sometimes it's like, great, really love the article, really helpful. Other times I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not covered in there. That question tells me what I should tee up for my next piece of content.
Right. The questions, like, who was like intensely great at this was HubSpot, right? HubSpot built their business by just answering the questions of their audience. It didn't even have to be like CRM related, which is kind of, where they started out. Like they were just there to answer the questions, become the expert, become the people that were adding value. Very much what you're talking about here, right? So is that you've got a background in research and analytics. And what I'm hearing is one of the most important parts of that on an ongoing basis is just conversations with your audience, conversations with your ICP, right? And learning from them so that therefore you can be that trusted advisor, that peer, right? That is helping them. Is that a good takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's a great takeaway. And the other thing I always say in this space is there's a lot of marketing guys and gals out there. So there's a lot of options. Like just when you talk pure marketing and trying to connect, a lot of times, you know, marketers don't always do the best job of marketing themselves and putting out there how they can truly help somebody.
Mhm.
So that's always the other takeaway. Like you said, it's not about me. It's how can I help you? So
Yeah.
again, let me get that peek behind the curtain. Let me be very direct of like, hey, your business is great or it's not great or whatever it may be, but put it out there what your audience actually cares about.
Well, so this leads to another question, and it is it's kind of around like the challenges and the evolution of B2B marketing. You've been doing this for a long time now. Where do you see this trending? Where do you see this going?
In our space, there's always going to be a need to acquire practices for these groups. So you can think of it as merger and acquisitions or, filling in a footprint. I think the challenge going forward as these doctors and owners are getting more sophisticated, because right, they're looking at more deals and they're looking at more people approaching them. You're going to start having conversations around, well, why your group over mine, right? Like, why is your group better than this one? Understanding what we kind of call like the multiples in the industry and how it really benefits them. And then also, the aspect of how does my legacy live on? If I'm ready to retire, that's one thing. But hey, maybe I want to stay with this practice for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Can I grow with this thing? Can I maybe grow into a clinical director role, maybe where I'm overseeing not just my practices, but other practices? Maybe I want to move up the ladder of the organization. So I think that's kind of key where it goes. And then I think that just from a pure marketing standpoint, we touched on it earlier, the LinkedIn and the AI impact is going to be huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I mean by that, it's these doctors, when I say doctor owners, people usually think gray haired guy or gal in their 60s or 70s. They're younger now. They're younger than me a lot of times. So they might be very successful. And in their 30s, the way they're digesting content might not be LinkedIn, might be TikTok, might be Snapchat, believe it or not. They might be going directly to a chat GPT to do their searches there to find like who's firms. So we got to start shifting in that direction because as these docs, like I said, they're 30s, soon to be in their 40s, they're going to want to sell. They're smart business people too. They're ready to make some money and stuff. And so we got to do our job of making sure we're pivoting and moving in the right direction and communicating with them on the platforms that they want to be on.
So I'm going to go back to something you said a little bit ago, and it was about just going and talking to the source, right? What that does, you said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a practice owner, but how many of them have talked to their peers as much as you have, right? When I do this podcast, I've had the benefit of talking to over 125 different C-suite executives, CMOs, CROs, CEOs. So by default, that gives you, a position of having the authority of their peer community because they haven't done that, right? So what I think you're doing is phenomenal because you're bringing value to them by bringing the voice of their peers to them and the insights and the challenges and the solutions and the way to think things through differently. You're providing that as a service, right? And that's building trust. And I would call that building trust in a way that is more not what a Gartner would call like a trusted advisor or counselor, but as a peer, right? And if we can be perceived as a peer, because this is my next question, I'm leading to it a long-winded way. Edelman also, they put out a report on trust, and every facet of trust is going down. Like generating trust in the world of B2B today is much more difficult than it was before. Another study came out and they said that 74% of B2B buyers, they don't trust the customer evidence we present to them. 74%, right? So how do we combat trust, the trust issue, the eroding trust?
Yeah, that's a great one, right? So, culturally, just outside of B2B, right? Culturally, we know that there's a lack of trust in a lot of things, mainstream media, politics, all that stuff. So, part of it is my style is to be direct, but you want to be transparent. You know, you want to share some information that, like I said, they can really look at and say, this makes sense. The
Yeah.
other thing that you can do is, right, you want to, as much as I say, hey, I go out there and I talk about it, I've got great doctor partners within my network. I've got a great operator within my network. I have great HR people. They speak too. And so part of that, like I said, is, one, being transparent, sharing the information. They might not understand, how a P&L works. And when you provide insight into, here's a P&L, here's how you do the math. I did an article at one dental group a while ago that basically said, like, when you're at that evaluation table, here's like the top 5 things you should look for. These might be things that they don't know about.
Yeah.
To even ask. Because, like, to your point, they might not have somebody that understands a P&L and how it works or things like that. So the more I think we can be transparent and share that type of information to them, I think that's huge in building the trust. Being accessible is another one. A lot of times, right? Like, hey, if you feel like you're trying to sell, and there's like, I just think this guy is here just to get a deal done, doesn't really care about me, that type of stuff. But when they can text you or call you and you're just going to answer that question in 10, 15 minutes, maybe that goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't.
Right.
But I know that that doctor likely is going to say somewhere down the line to their other friends, yeah, I heard of this Ryan guy, or I talked to him. He gave me some answers on, whatever, how to make my digital marketing better and what to look for to truly validate the ROI. He didn't ask me for anything in return. He just gave me 10, 15 minutes of his time.
Right.
That goes a huge, long way with building trust.
Yeah. When it's transparent. I mean, there's, in the typical sales conversation, like Gong's one of the big ones in recording, like recorded sales conversations. And it's hard to build trust there. A, you're being sold. Also, the sales reps talk about, they said between 2/3 and 3/4 of the time, right? So it's more talking about them than it is how to help them, right? And that's what I'm taking away from what you're talking about is put aside here's how I can get a win today. How can I help them today, right? Because they may not be in the position to sell or want to sell right now. That might change next year, might change the year after that. You don't really ever know. But if you position yourself as the guy that can help them, period, then you're breaking through that trust and you're building a relationship that will last over time. That's I think that's one of my biggest takeaways here.
Correct. Yep. Eventually, if you want to call them sales, eventually the sales come.
Yeah.
It's all just building the pipeline. But I do think, like, there used to be a way to do business, right? You could do a handshake, back in the day, pre-me, like back in my grandfather's day. But, your word used to mean a lot. And, pointing people in the right direction used to mean a lot. And being there to, like I said, just to answer those questions and stuff like that. People got to get back to that. It's just not knocking my door. What are you trying to sell me today? These doctors, they're getting hit up with anything and everything. What could be equipment sales. It could be sell your practice to me. And then like any of us, right? Like none of us like to, feel like we got a screw job on some deal where you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize, like just because I didn't know it, they took advantage of me. Right. So I think that there's definitely a better way to do things. And like you said, it's, share the knowledge, be there to help them. That goes a long way today.
What question haven't I asked? What would you want people to know that we haven't already talked about today in terms of, this podcast and, being a B2B marketer in this, overloaded economy of intentions and competition, and you're not alone. And there's like 30 other practices that are targeting them. Most businesses today have around 25 different competitors. What haven't we covered yet?
I think probably the big one, if you said, hey, here's what we haven't covered yet. And like, what's a nugget for them to take away, which is, figure out where your audience is going and realize you're going to have to meet them on multiple fronts. So as much as we've talked about LinkedIn, we've talked about a little bit about, industry publications, pushing the thought content out there. Going to the trade shows still, makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
In our world, actually visiting the doctors the best that you can, just get out there, maybe somehow, whether it be sponsor a study club, something like that, to just get to know them. I think that is again, it's old school,
Yeah.
but it is something that a lot of people just don't want to do today.
Right.
Or they feel like they have to. And it's like, well, I go to the trade show, I'm just going to stand in my booth and hopefully they come to me. And there's a difference of, well, let me get out there and, engage with you and kind of talk with you. And look, I mean, sometimes not everybody's going to like you, but
Right.
that's life.
Right.
Get out there. And they said, you're presenting content and thought leadership and articles where they're like, hey, I'm not hearing this anywhere else.
Right.
Everyone else is telling me not to do this. He's telling me I should do it. Everyone else is telling me they're afraid of AI and, oh, I'm nervous and the machines are going to take over the world. And
Right.
he's telling me I can post it with my iPhone, shoot a 30-second video, or maybe it's just written word because I don't like to be on camera, and I can spend $25. I can target my audience a lot better. That's what I tell people. It's just like, just get back to being a little bit old fashioned, at the same time, leverage the new stuff, bring those two together. And if you're authentic, I think, again, it goes a long way.
Is there like we remember things 22 times more when it's told to us in the form of a story? Is there, think of all the interactions you've had. You don't have to name any names or anything, but just in going old fashioned and helping and talking to them, supporting them, putting their needs first. Like, has there been somebody that had just an incredible reaction to that in a very positive way? Did it open up a new pathway, an opportunity for the business? Like, is there something you could share with us where this worked out really well?
Yeah. So I'll speak in the industry every once in a while. We have different industry shows and stuff like that. So probably about a month or two ago, I was down in Atlanta. We had a big dental show down there. Doctors and practice owners and vendors and all sorts. So I was on a nice panel, some great people with me. But when I just basically told them, and the conversation was around like AI and how to find deals and what should you be looking for to, sell your practice, that type of stuff. And when I told them, the audience point blank, like my other panel members are telling you that like you should not be using AI and, just kind of do what you've always done. I completely disagree. Like you should be using Chat GPT every single day in some fashion, whether it's, hey, how do I drive here, or Gemini or some of these other ones. But I'm like, you can go in there and start punching information in. It might not be 1,000% correct, but it's directionally correct.
Yeah.
In terms of what can I do to improve my practice to, be able to get a better return on it.
Right.
What are the top 5, 10 questions I should ask somebody who's approaching me to buy my practice? So that, that just me kind of giving those talking points out there. And I talked to, one of the questions was like AI and how am I leveraging it to make my marketing more cost effective. So I got into like how you can shoot videos with AI and not have to send a crew out there anymore, stuff like that. But, to answer your question, right? So I get off stage, you kind of go out into like the main lobby area and there was 10 people from different groups that all of a sudden wanted to come up different fashions, but it was like one after another and said, hey, great. Can I get your phone number? Can we talk? Or would you mind taking a look at something I have over here? And exactly what I was telling your audience is I didn't say, oh, I'm too busy, I got to go. I said, great. I said, let's look at it right now. Do you have your laptop? Pull it open. Like, let's do it while I'm here. And I know that that gentleman really appreciated that because he was like, well, I figured you're busy and you might have to go or you got some other meetings. I'm like, no, like, might as well do it. We're here. So like, let me help you right now on the spot. And so, not all 10 necessarily are, probably going to convert for us, but we got 3 or 4 out of there that are definitely on the deal radar. And, might very well close in 2025.
That's great. That's great. It's, so putting yourself out and being there of service is a part of the service of the business, right? We think of ourselves as our core functions of what we do as a business, but what you're talking about is a big part of what we do is a support arm for our clients, right? In our prospects. Like, how do we just help them? And McKinsey came out with a study last year that said they looked at B2C and B2B companies and long-term profitable companies that had the biggest return back to shareholders. And this is the number one difference in those companies was customer experience. And what you're articulating, I keep thinking over and over again, you are adding an entire new level of experience with your company by how you're helping, you're supporting. You think about it that way, or does that make any sense? Or
No, so I've kind of thought of that way. There's some old quote, and I'll butcher it here, but it was something like, people will always remember how you made them feel,
yeah,
but not necessarily the information you gave them or something like that.
yeah,
So like I said, as I've done it, over the years, I've just learned, right? Like we've all been there, right? Like, oh, I want to talk to the CEO of such and such company, and he or she are too busy for you, or it's like, hey, Steve, thanks, here's my business card. Why don't you call me next week or whatever? And sure, if you're running to try to grab a flight or something like that, that happens. You got to go. But just getting down to like I call it a jeans and a t-shirt type conversation. Hey, great. Like I said, the example I gave you, like, let's talk right now. Like, open your laptop.
yeah,
Let's just go
yeah,
over it. Like, like I'm here. Like, you should use me. And I realize, we're the experts in the room. We should share that knowledge with them.
yep,
Yeah, and they're going to appreciate it a lot more. But hopefully they walk away and they say, "Great, that guy or that gal, right? They made time for me when they didn't have to." And then it's the old, right? You just never know. 5-10 years from now, they might be somewhere else and they can help you out or vice versa. But I do believe, karma, and I do believe that word spreads.
yeah,
And if you can kind of build that and give them that experience where they're like, "Hey, great, it was a great interaction." Like I said, it's not all going to tip in your favor,
yeah.
but more times than not, it'll play out in your favor.
Words of wisdom, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on. I know people are going to have follow-up questions. Would it be appropriate that I give out a link to your LinkedIn profile where people could reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can give that out, and I give my email out to everybody. Feel free to reach me. It's just my first and last name. So Ryan Torresan at gmail.com. Feel free to email or hit me up on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, Ryan, again, thank you for coming on and sharing today. And this is you again adding value to your peer community here. And just we appreciate everything you said today.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me, Steve. Hopefully it's very helpful.